engineer or a mechanical engineer?
I am actually a chemist by education, but I had a degree in electronics engineering when I was in the Air Force. I was in electronics technology when I was in the Air Force. And when I got out, I stayed in the field, and I've been in the automotive manufacturing business since the early 90s. So by trade, I have picked up the electrical engineering and the mechanical engineering, and of course, surround myself with really smart people that can design the ideas that I come up with. And in 2014, we designed the nation's first all-electric on-highway electric pickup truck from the ground up as a truck.
Wow.
So it's doing quite well, and hopefully we go into full production in the spring.
Wow. Well, now, Brooks, let me ask you this. I mean, I know I'm an old buzzard, but the idea of these self-driving vehicles is something I don't feel really comfortable with, but they're talking about self-driving trucks.
Well, I can, sometimes we use robots in the plant. Some of the plants we have are 50 or 60 acres under roof. And
wow.
We have a section of the plant we call recon, which is recontainerization. Stuff comes in from the train or comes in on a shipping container, and we have to sequence that, put it in order of color, and then send it to the assembly line. And sometimes we use robots or we use self-driving carts to drive those things to the assembly line, but they're driving a wire that's in the concrete, so they can't get lost.
Well, that I could relate to, but I'm talking about actually on the highway.
Yeah, the first self-driving car I came in contact with was a Lotus that was built by Lotus Engineering up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They had won a self-driving car contest. They only spent $100,000 on the car. And of course, any car can navigate a map, by GPS, but then it has to take in other things like other vehicles around it, dogs, people, a tire tread laying in the road. It has to be able to see hazards. And this is where the vehicles fall short, because they don't have eyes like we have eyes. For instance, late last year, there was a car that smashed into the back of a tractor trailer's trailer because it was shiny aluminum. And the reason is that the vision system in the car could not see the shiny aluminum. It was invisible to it. So it just drove into the back of the truck at 80 miles an hour, of course, killed the people in the vehicle.
Terrible.
And then they have a lot of low-speed mistakes. There's countless YouTubes out there of drivers being run over by their own cars because they make low-speed mistakes. They don't have resolution like we have resolution. We can see, down to a quarter of an inch, even at 30 miles an hour. But even a 3,000-bit camera cannot see that. So it's self-driving cars are not there because the public is demanding them. Let's get that out right now. They are there because DARPA is pouring billions of dollars into developing the technology, so car company developers will come up with the navigation software that they can put into military vehicles for urban assault. That's why they're coming up with self-driving cars. Because there's a lot of money in it, a lot of grant money. Nobody's buying them, and nobody ever will buy them. Nobody will ever buy them. This is all driven by military research.
Oh, good. I'm glad they won't. I don't want to be running around little robot cars running into me, right? That's good. Good Lord.
Yeah, no, that doesn't sound like fun.
No, and I see what you're saying. You'd have to react to skids on icy roads or all this other stuff. I just don't see it happening. But
humans have 120 degrees of peripheral vision, and we can run as fast as 25 miles an hour at an oblique angle to that moving object and catch it midair in a glove. No robot can do that.
So in other words, we're not to be purchasing any self-driving cars right now.
Well, first of all, I don't think you can buy one. I think you can lease them. I think there are study programs, research programs, but I don't think you can actually buy a self-driving car right now.
Well, the Teslas are doing somewhat. of a self-drive.
That's because there's a lot of grant money in it, and they need it because they've had some supply chain problems.
There's a lot of them here in Chicago. A lot of those Teslas, I see them. They're interesting.
Well, now, what about that Uber? Weren't they having an Uber self-driving car?
They have a self-driving module on the car, yes, but cars are drive-by-wire anyway. You don't press a gas pedal anymore. We haven't pressed a gas pedal in over 30 years. It's a transducer that we move with the accelerator pedal. That tells a computer how fast you're telling the vehicle to go. So now the computer can do all that for you. But if it messes up or it's hacked somehow, then people die. And it's very dangerous. Driving a 4,000-pound vehicle at 80 miles an hour is dangerous anyway, but it's especially dangerous when it's in the hands of a computer.
Sounds great.
Well, I know you were the one to know about all that. That's just despicable, but that sounds...
It is.
I am one of the very few people that know all about it, yes. So I'm telling you right now, you will never see self-driving cars on the highway in America. You might see them in urban where they're driving routes. They're driving the same route every single day. But there are emissivity problems with vision systems. There are glitches in GPS systems. I don't think there's a single listener to tonight's program that hasn't had a glitch in their GPS system on their phone. Well, the same thing happens in a car. Only when it happens in a car, somebody gets hurt.
Wow. I'm glad you gave us that information. I mean, I was thinking about these 80,000-pound trucks was being self-driving. I was thinking, boy, that's a disaster looking to happen. I mean, my goodness.
It is. It is definitely a disaster waiting to happen. That's a lot of kinetic energy. And when you don't have a human behind the wheel or a human that's aware and awake of what's going on behind the wheel or in full control behind the wheel, you have a real problem.
Well, I'm glad you told us that. I really am. Heidi, did you have a tough time getting back down from Milwaukee to Chicago in the snow?
Oh gosh, what on earth hit us? I don't even understand it. Yeah, it was a bit wicked, And we have this thing called lake effect snow, so it was truly just when you thought it was clearing up, it would dump some more on you. So I waited it out a couple of days in addition. So
how
no work
many feet
for
did
me.
You get? How many feet?
Oh no, it was where I was at in Milwaukee, it had done 10.5 inches, and they were expecting about 4 more. No, so it was over a foot. Over a foot. It was
Albany
pretty.
Got about 2.5 foot.
Oh, good Lord.
It's the wind that makes that snow dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
Well, see, I'm just in love with New York, so I'm always interested in New York having the one-upmanship on Illinois or any other place. I just love New York. But no, they're getting some places 40 inches. Some parts of upstate New York. But anyway, I guess
about those aliens at the pole.
Yes,
I'm so dying to know. I've been hearing a lot of rumors about this going on. I mean, what are they talking about exactly? What is this rumor?
Well, I wish I knew more because my area of focus for the last 7 or 8 years with the Inner Earth expedition has been the Arctic, not the Antarctic. But I am fascinated with a number of people that have shown interest in the Antarctic lately. And I don't mean tourists. I mean like secretaries of state, ministers from Russia. The fact that there has been an early and accelerated evacuation that took place recently and a replacement with military personnel. Something is out of the ordinary in the Antarctic, that's for sure.
So you mean when they're showing interest, they're going there? I'm sorry.
Yes. Secretary of State John Kerry went there. One of the cardinals from Russia went there. And, they took their pictures with the penguins, but that's not why they go. You could see those at the local zoo. And it's... there are rumors that it has something to do with ancient beings like giants that may have gotten out of their containment, perhaps, a revolt by another race that might be down there, military technology that was discovered that is not from around here, those kinds of things. But like you said, it's all rumor, it's all speculation, and there are lots of individuals that make a living on that kind of information. I'm not one of them, but
Yeah.
They're all tooting their horn like they know exactly what it is. Now, I've tried several times to go to Antarctica, but if you're not affiliated, that is to say, not aligned with a university or some kind of military grant program or with a National Science Foundation or Polar Research Foundation, you're not going to Antarctica. There's no tourist runs to Antarctica. And so I'm not affiliated. I'm not associated with the military in any way. So there were no openings for us. Anywhere else,
Yeah.
I'm open to go.
I didn't know there
Well,
was
now-
a rule against that area. Wild.
Well, I guess you can go to the Arctic itself just anytime you so desire, I suppose.
Well, that's not a great tourist place either. I mean, there's no gas stations. There's only a couple of ways to get there. You can drive around the outside of it by sea, even though they're about the roughest oceans on the planet. You can go by dog sled a certain distance up from Alaska or from Canada, but you're not going to go very far because, the ice can be quite treacherous, and you're not the largest animal up there. And some of them can run 40 miles an hour over that open ice.
Oh, you mean the polar bears?
Yeah, polar bears and sea lions too. They're pretty vicious too.
They are really. I've never heard much about them.
And you can fly over it, but we tried to charter a jet some years ago to take 11 of us, and we were going to just take pictures out the window. But the lowest that it would fly was 17,000 feet, and they couldn't guarantee that we wouldn't just see clouds on the charter day. So sure. we said that's not worth it. Even Buzz Aldrin went down there, which is quite a rigorous trip for an old guy like that. It's just amazing to me, Bill Clinton, Prince Harry, John Kerry, all these individuals going to Antarctica. It's like, hey, you guys better see it before it's gone, or hey, we discovered something really new we don't want anyone else to know about except you important people.
Is the alleged reason that they're worried about the sea ice disintegrating or something like that? Is that the alleged posted reason? Or
well, there is a large crack that's forming down there, but you're right, that is sea ice, and it's not going to do anything except float around. And I think maybe even Japan talked about latching onto it and pushing it to Japan and using it for a source of fresh water. It won't do anything to the ecology at all. But if you have land ice that melts, that can actually affect sea level, because if it's supported by land, it's not buoyant in the water, then you're adding fresh water back to the sea. You could, add a piece of ice the size of the state of Connecticut back to the ocean. It could be significant if it's land ice, but if it's sea ice, it doesn't make any difference.
Oh, fascinating.
Heidi, have you ever heard of Brooks? Heidi, have you ever heard of the Purus Reyes map? I'm probably not saying it right, but
yeah, it's an ancient map, and some are saying that it is a map of Antarctica without all the ice, that there's some kind of continent there, and I doubt that map is actually accurate, because if they actually did have the actual land shape down there, they would not have sailed the way that they said that they sailed. Oceans would be quite different.
Because I remember that was supposedly, in whatever I read some 15 years ago, that was ostensibly an accurate representation of the place without ice. I mean, that was what they were saying.
Well, some of the ice cores research that I've read, some of that ice is 25,000 years old. So I doubt it was an accurate map.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it. Well, I mean, I don't know how they determined it was accurate. I mean, some kind of imaging or something. I don't know. But anyway, the show I saw, whether it was valid or not, said that it was supposedly an accurate representation. I don't know how they would have determined that, but
that's wild. Yeah, I'm looking it up right now. It is kind of cool. What I'm curious about, you're mentioning all these dignitaries and whatnot that have gone to the area. How do we know that they actually went there? I mean, do we know exactly what area they're going to?
We don't know exactly what area they're going to, but Several of them have published videos, and I've actually watched the videos, so you could see, John Kerry in his, freshly bought Gander Mountain boots and, all the regular stuff. You could, and they're there during the summertime, which is our winter time, November, December, January. But, now we're coming up on Antarctica winter. So we're talking about 4, maybe 5 months of darkness, temperatures between 60 and 90 below zero.
All right.
That's not the kind of weather that you fly planes in and out of, because
not too much, no.
Well, you need to be able to see the ice that you're landing on. And when it's pitch black, no moon, or overcast and dark, you can't see the ice, and it's treacherous to land and take off. So they like to go down there and back when it's light, when they can see.
Makes sense. Now, there's also the rumor that they're going there to examine the remains of a secret Nazi UFO base.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think of that?
I think that's probably valid, because we do know that there are several dozen U-boats unaccounted for. Now, some of them, they figure were scuttled in the Atlantic somewhere, and, they took their dinghies and rowed into New York and assimilated. That we know. But we also know some of the U-boats did actually turn up missing, and they left out of Norway. We tracked them that far, and some of them were carrying gold. Some of them were carrying, high-level officers and leadership. And we do know that they were making trips down there as early as late 1939. So that's like 5 years of trips back and forth between Germany and the Third Reich and Antarctica. That's a long time. And of course, they had unlimited resources, all the gold in the world, all the money in the world. They were the first ones out of the Depression. They had engineers out the wazoo, and they could have built quite the complex way out of the way in Antarctica, so much so that, Operation Paperclip or High Jump was sent down there to survey the situation. And honestly, we don't have any official report of what happened. There are rumors that they met, flying saucers, that they were cut to pieces, that they lost ships and men, and they ended up hobbling their way back to Argentina and, going home from there. And these are supposedly 5,000 battle-hardened troops, because we just came through the worst war the world had ever known. And they didn't want to go through it again, so they wanted to go mop up the rest of the Nazis. But officially, there's no report about Operation High Jump.
Officially.
Boy, there is about everything else. That's really striking itself. I mean, everything else has been scrutinized to the maximum. But
you would have thought there would have been reporters on the boat filming, everything in black and white at least, but there was nothing. No
there were these
photographs.
folk tales. There were these little folk tales that at the end of the war they escaped down there. But I mean, what a terrible place to escape to. I mean, a lot of them.
Well, that's what I would say. Anywhere above that ice is just going to be. I mean, to get down to about 6% humidity, the human body just does not exist. I don't care how warm it is.
Well, yes, that would be just ridiculous. But I mean, the idea of making an outpost or, a remnant of the Third Reich down there, you might as well just commit suicide right then and just not bother.
Well, we did it in the Arctic, and around the same time period, too. We built bases up in the Arctic, and what we did is hob them out of the ice. And I've seen great hour-long documentaries about the bases that we made in the Arctic. And, yeah, it was all under the ice. They were like big old huge Quonset huts built under the ice. And they survived just fine. They had plenty of supplies, plenty of food, plenty of water. They had great entertainment, great food.
Oh,
and but at the end of the war, it was abandoned. It was allowed to crumble. But you could do the same thing in the Antarctic quite easily.
Yeah. I don't know. And there's also tremendous Russian activity or interest in the Antarctica.
Yes, there is. And in fact, the Russians were involved for, I'm going to say 10 years, drilling a hole to an underground lake called Lake Vostok. And
Oh, yes.
actually, there are 90 countries that participate in an international effort to explore the Antarctic. And there are several science projects down there, not the least of which is measuring neutrinos. It's a great neutrino lab down there. They have a lot of observatories for looking at the southern hemisphere, which we really don't see very well from anywhere else on the planet.
Sure.
And this is all run by this multinational, I want to say it, a consortium, and they actually trade off, I think, annually.
Well, now, Brooks, I don't mean to interrupt, but we're just about ready to our bottom of the hour break. We'll be right back with it. We'll be right back.
There's no report on any of this. There's no, even if there is press down there, they're not allowed to send anything out. I've not seen any pictures, no reports. Really? I go to the Polar Research Foundation and just look up papers, and everything is redacted. Everything is in abstract form. There's nothing to see. Nothing to see here. Move along. It's for the amount of money that 99 countries are spending down there. Yeah. There is not a whole lot of information that's published.
What do you think about this? I'm sorry, the
go ahead, honey.
Pyramid that they're saying is down there.
Yeah, I've heard that too, that there's a pyramid underneath the ice, and they're trying to do some ground probing radar, but trust me, I'm one of the developers of ground probing radar. It doesn't work through water.
Wow, water, there's a conundrum.
It doesn't function. Yeah. It'll work through solid rock, but once you're over water, whether it's a lake or an ocean or snow, verboten, it doesn't work.
Oh, doggone, that's wild. Well, I just, there's one guest we have periodically that's Paul Eno. He has a show in Boston, and he also used to be in military intelligence. And remember, Heidi, there are all these little anomalous places, even in the United States, that he and a fellow were investigating, Brooks, just in Pennsylvania, regular old Pennsylvania. And essentially, he was told from his contracts, military intelligence, just mind your own business and don't push this too hard in investigation. Just basically shove off. And yes, we know about 10% of what's going on, in essence.
I remember, you remember HAARP, right? The High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Well, I was approached because of a paper that I had written about using ground probing radar for oil and gas exploration. And I wrote a paper that this kind of technology could be used to look for subterranean water on Mars. Oh. And I get a phone call from a group out of Alaska. They're shooting a documentary called Holes in Heaven about HAARP. Well, I didn't know HAARP from a rock at that time. But they came down, explained to me what the system was, and I said, who invented this? And they said, Dr. Bernard Eastlund. So we got him on the phone. I spent an hour on the phone with him. And I said, so how much, what frequencies they're using? And they told me what frequency, the carrier frequency that they were using for the HAARP invention. It was in the 2-meter band. I said, hey, you got to be careful with that frequency because there are harmonics that can do real damage. How much power are you putting behind this? I was using 30 watts. They were putting 1 billion watts behind it.
1 billion watts?
1 billion watts. Oh. And I said, let me do some calculations and I'll get back with you. So the next day I get him back on the phone. I said, look, I've done some calculations here and you really have to be careful because if you focus that beam, you're going to create an ion path between the ionosphere and ground. And it may, if you charge up the ionosphere with enough energy, it may discharge back down that ion path. And not only will it wipe the HAARP facility out, but the entire ionosphere will discharge until it does not have the potential to make the jump anymore. It could go for minutes. And if it does, it's every single time it pulses, and it could pulse 10 to 15, 16 times a second. It will take 6 inches of soil with it.
Good Lord.
So it would be like 50 Mount St. Helens volcanoes per minute going off as long as it ran. And those are it was about 2.8 megatons per pulse. It was quite devastating. I called it a solar tap. So we made the documentary, which came out in 1997, and it was a huge seller. I go to conferences, I still see that video for sale out there. I had hair and everything.
Mm-hmm. I'll be darned. Well, that there's some. I mean, why? What did they say? Why they would be using 1 billion watts? Whatever scientific purpose that would be for. I mean,
it was. There were 7 aspects to this. It was discovered to be an ionospheric heater. So you could push the ionosphere out into space some miles and create a kind of atmospheric parabolic dish. And then you could bounce signals off of that to do several things. One, you could communicate very precisely with submarines without surrounding areas picking up the signal. You could do it very, very precisely. So you would, in essence, control the Marconi effect. Marconi is the guy that bounced an AM signal across the Atlantic to a receiver. Right. And he did so by using the ionosphere as a reflector. Well, you can't always do that because it doesn't always cooperate. It moves around on its own. But you can manipulate it. The second thing that happens is when you push the ionosphere out into space, the stratosphere moves in to fill in the void, which can reroute the jet stream, which means you can move the atmospheric river around and somewhat control weather. So that was... Yeah, so that was one of the... In fact, it was so effective that year, Clinton was president and Secretary of State James Cohen was Secretary of Defense, that we had to sign a global treaty, and I have a copy of the treaty with his signature on it, agreeing not to use it as a weapon, as a weather weapon.
Yeah.
So that's crazy.
This kind of technology is out there.
I mean, you don't hear about it much in the last couple of years, but they were all big into talking about weather weapons here within recent years, and how.
Well, that's because climate change was the number one enemy of the world, and if you have an enemy, well, you're going to go to the arsenal and pull your weapons out and go fight it. Yeah. So here we are in this Quixotic battle against Mother Nature, using chemtrails and HARP and everything else, and we lost. It didn't work.
Oh, I got to tell you guys. Did I tell you about the chemtrails I saw over here, right in Dallas Fort Worth?
No, I didn't hear about that.
Well, Brooks, I'm only not very far, perhaps 10 miles from the DFW airport, and I've observed. It's kind of on the Fort Worth side, but I've observed, honest to goodness, 24-karat chemtrails around here. I mean, I took photos of it, had it on the phone for a long time. And I mean, obvious patterns made by some kind of jets. I mean, it wasn't just a regular jet just going about its business. They were like little checkerboard square-looking things where you'd have to go to an effort to make a pattern. And, I'm not a pilot. I'm not, Air Force guy or anything else, but I'm not an idiot. I know there has to be some reason you're making a pattern in the sky.
Well, there's another hurricane coming this way too, just so you know, because Trump just released his taxes. Hold on the fort.
Those are sorry to say, those tax forms are 10 years old.
Yes, Rachel, 2005.
Yeah, Rachel Maddow is just trying to make some ratings for herself. And yes, by the way, she could still find herself in jail.
The White House released it ahead of her. They just released it just now.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's
2005.
Kind of water over the dam taxes. But no, I mean, I was going to ask you about weather manipulation, that chemtrail business, because like I say, I've observed it several times here, and it's obviously making little crisscross patterns, which is kind of expensive for a jet.
Well, you can tell when they're there and when they're not there. We haven't had them this year. We've had our Carolina blue skies back, and the little 3-inch contrails behind the jets that we're used to seeing. But I have seen them before. And one thing a lot of people don't know is there are jetways, skyways in the sky, because jets in the United States have to fly what are called airways. We have to fly nav aids from one airport to another airport. You can't just fly to LA from here. No. You got to fly to this airport, that airport, another airport. It's kind of a zigzag pattern across the country because the controllers at each one of the airports have to account for all the airplanes in the sky over the United States. Right. Even though planes are capable of flying by GPS, they're not allowed to fly by GPS over the United States. So there are skyways, different altitudes, of course, for different directions, but there are skyways. So to see a crisscross pattern, like a bingo or a tic-tac-toe pattern in the sky, that's not natural. This is not what you would see with skyways.
What would you say about airplanes that could be remotely controlled?
Well, those are not allowed to fly over the continental United States. Even drones have altitude limits that they can fly, even military ones in the United States. And so
they're not allowed, but this technology exists, though, right?
It does exist. And in the United States, you cannot fly a revenue point-to-point without an aircraft with an N number on it. And military aircraft do not have N numbers. So they are not allowed to fly revenue legs inside the United States.
So what do they use this for, this remote control type of stuff? Mostly for airplanes?
It's for rescue. For instance, if the cabin depressurizes and the crew passes out because they don't get their oxygen mask or they freeze to death at 60 below up there, they can take control of the plane and land it. That's what it's for.
And that's only in military planes, you're saying?
Some commercial planes have them. They're not required by the FAA yet, and that's why occasionally you do see a private Learjet that flies off course and just keeps right on flying until it runs out of fuel and smashes into the ground because everybody on board is dead.
That's interesting.
I've always been fascinated with the Arctic, like yourself. When I read the little pieces out of Admiral Byrd's account of going into the center of the Earth and seeing UFOs and Lord knows what all. I've always been fascinated with the Arctic itself, as opposed to the Antarctic. Because Byrd said he saw UFOs.
Well, of course, being a North Pole Inner Earth expedition aficionado like I am, and having led the expedition for 7 years, I'm familiar with the story. But I have to say there are two diaries. One diary was released by his grandson, and that is an official diary of the actual flight. In that diary, you'll see a couple of erasures and, some notes in the side. It's all handwritten, some sextant readings, but there isn't any of what you just talked about. There's another diary that has a picture of like Agartha on the front of it, and that diary is fake from front to back. Everything in it is phony.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay.
It is too bad. It is too bad. Because, the whole world was watching that like a giant reality show in its day. And it was well publicized because people just needed a hero in those days. This is 1926. So we just come through the war to end all wars. We were coming up on the Depression. It hadn't even happened yet. And people were really excited about being in high-tech times. And they took the Chantier, which is a trawler of sorts. They took the Fokker plane apart, took the wings off, and put it on the boat, sailed it up to Spitsbergen, took it off the boat, reassembled it, which took a while. And I have pictures of all this. And then took off and flew at a blazing 80 miles an hour, 1,500 miles, up to the North Pole and back. And according to his speed and his sextant readings, he was actually a little bit short of the North Pole. He later changed some of the sextant readings in the book, and this is where the controversy came in about the whole thing. Because the only two pieces of equipment they had for navigation was the compass in the plane and a sextant. But it was a 1926 naval sextant, not capable of measuring down to the arcsecond. So he could not have put those measurements in the book. The sextant won't read out in those amounts. Not many people know that, but if you do enough research, you can find this stuff out. So there's some controversy about his North Pole flight. But nevertheless, he did receive the Congressional Medal of Honor, and it was a big, big deal in its day.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions from the chat room. Okay. This one is asking from Carol, was there any information resolution to the mysterious object buried under the ice in Lake Vlastok? Going back about 8 years ago. Vlastok, there you go. Art Bell addressed it, she says.
There was some drone measurements that were taken by air, and evidently under the ice along one of the shorelines of this lake, which is it's a pretty long lake underneath the ice, they did pick up what they call an energy anomaly, and it took a long time to drill a hole to this space. They have to drill with alcohol because it's so cold. You can't just drill the ice. You have to melt the ice too. And the only solvent that they could use in that area that would be allowed to be environmentally safe was alcohol. So it took a long time. Like, they only drilled 3 months out of the year. So they have to come back, chisel the ice off, set everything back up again and start drilling again. It took 10 years to drill this hole, a 6-inch hole. Once they're getting close to drilling into the area, now there are all kinds of environmental concerns. What if the headspace is under pressure? What if there's a virus down there that we don't have an immunity to? All of these questions came out, so they had to build a special airlock in the hole, and then they had to go down with a camera with a light source. And Kevin Smith, the late Kevin Smith, and myself followed this very, very closely for a couple of years, and no real information came back out. No water samples, no life samples, no photographs. We weren't able to put a probe down there because the hole was too far and too long and too crooked, and it was it was a real, problem. Oh. But evidently, recently they must have discovered something, because it has been very, very popular in the last 6 months.
Wow. And that was kind of a follow-up to the other question somebody was asking about what the magnetic anomaly is over there, too. So that's crazy.
It could be a lot of stuff. I mean, it could just be a fissure in the ground, which, I've done a lot of scanning of property using gamma and alpha decay equipment, and of course lots and lots of different kinds of antennas over 9 states. And I have seen magnetic anomalies in the ground that were repeatable, but other than just being a crack in the ground, nothing special about them. But evidently this was putting off some kind of radiation. So we don't really know yet. As far as I know, the jury is still out.
Yeah, it sounds like we should resort to the good old days and tie a rope around somebody's ankle and lower them down slowly, have them holler back what's going on.
Well, I think it's about 2,500 feet of ice, so
yeah. Kevin will do it.
You need somebody really skinny.
Oh, I don't know then. Never mind.
I'm not that skinny. But wow, the polls just always tickled me. But that's actually kind of disappointing that Admiral Byrd didn't see any UFOs. I'm really sorry that there was a phony account.
Yeah. There have been pilots that have seen UFOs.
Yeah, plenty. I mean Byrd himself, because he had credibility as being a big hero type and all that. But I guess we'll have to be satisfied with Buzz Aldrin and some others and Edgar Mitchell to believe in.
Which astronaut was it that was over at the pole?
Buzz Aldrin.
It was him, and he had that medical emergency. What was he doing over there?
That we don't know. He had some kind of, I don't know if it was, it couldn't have been a heart attack, not at that age, but he had some kind of thing. He had to be medevaced out, and it's not an easy thing to schedule. You have routes, you have schedules, but it's difficult to charter something to fly down there. It has to be specially outfitted.
Yeah, I thought it was odd that they, highlighted he needed to rush out, but they never said what he was doing over there. I'm like, huh? What is this?
They never said what John Kerry was doing, or the Prince Edward, or any of the other people that went down there.
Why would Russian clergymen go down there? That doesn't make sense either. I mean,
I saw the video with him too, and it looked to me like he was a tourist, but they didn't show anything other than him playing around with the penguins on the edge of the water.
Maybe they were asking Buzz, is this what the alien looked like that you ran into?
That seems like a long way to go to be a tourist and for a cleric type, but this doesn't seem to match up. But
Definitely. No, it doesn't seem to match up. It's not on the way to anywhere.
no. Well, it's just intriguing. But now let me ask you this: when is X Squared Radio on? How would I get up with that?
Well, we're on at 8 to 11 on Sunday nights. So about 13 years ago, I was on Coast to Coast for the first time, and somebody said, hey, you need to get a program of your own. And, podcasts were rare back then. So I went on Sunday nights, and I built a following, and I've been there ever since. I started out at BBS Radio. I was there for 10 years, and then I moved over to Truth Frequency Radio Network, where my audience is a little bit more prevalent, and we've been there ever since. And then the idea was Coast to Coast is on every weekday night, so I'm not going to compete with them. So I'll go on the weekend. Yeah. And over the years, it became the first news show of the week. Instead of wrapping up the week, I was the one driving the nail in the headlines Sunday night.
Well, that's good. Hello.
I'm checking out your site right now. You look so normal.
What were you expecting to look like?
Looks can be deceiving.
Well, I'm thinking of an Einstein-looking crazy guy. I don't know.
Well, I have to operate in the real world. I have a day job. Being a CEO of an electric car company, they expect you to, if they're going to invest money in you, they want you to look normal.
I guess.
If I was an academic, Katie barred the door. I'm never cutting my eyebrows again.
Wow, Kevin, you could never make it.
I look pretty normal.
Just kidding.
Like a red-headed gorilla, but I mean, like something, But I had an anomaly that, this is fairly interesting. It wouldn't really match up too much with your expertise, but we're talking about in the car issues. Well, what happened was my business partner and I were driving a little rental because we're doing all this running around the last couple of weeks. And I heard a mechanized voice say, wait. And I was just at a suburban intersection. It wasn't, anything, frantic kind of avoidance maneuver.
Was it the crosswalk?
No, it was just a regular old non-protected intersection. It was, just very anomalous. I mean, nothing. Very pedestrian, rather. And what I'm saying is it sounded like it was in the car, not saying a loudspeaker from another vehicle, and I've never run across that anyway with somebody wise guying you with a microphone or anything. But we both heard it audibly, and I talked to a 20-year tech at the Toyota place, and they said there's nothing like that. I mean, if you have, navigation, it might say take left, take it next left in 100 feet or something like this, something very specific, but not preachy like that. At any rate, we sure enough both heard it, and nobody has an adequate explanation. None.
That's bizarre.
So I didn't know if you knew that.
It is bizarre. Well, the only thing I can think of is sometimes crosswalks have those, crossing aids for the blind. Like
No, this doesn't have anything that specific. It's just a regular suburban neighborhood. I mean, nothing. It wasn't a marked off crosswalk or anything like that. No, it was.
That's amazing. So did it help you avoid some accident, or like did a train go by in front of you, or?
No, it was like I say. It just seemed very pedestrian. Nothing pedestrian in the context of normal. I mean, nothing impending doom. Now, maybe if I hadn't been alerted to waiting, maybe I'd have been struck by somebody took a quick left or something. But there was no way that made any sense to explain it. None. But I have all kinds of weird things happen all the time. But
that's
your mission's not done. I was curious about what you thought about the Morgellons disease, where those fibers are growing out of people's skin and they're blaming it on the chemtrails. Do you see any link with such a thing?
I don't have an opinion on it. I've seen it. It fascinates me, but I haven't studied it. I don't have anything to say about that. I mean, that is a really weird disease to have.
And very irritating.
Well, I bet.
I've had that after hanging fiberglass, but...
Oh, yeah, right. Painful.
Well, now, Brooks, it's been great having you. We're just about ready to have to say good night, but it's very excellent. I hope it's not so long before you're back on again.
Just say the word. Just say the word. I'd love to join you anytime.
Wonderful. Okay. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, you have fun in North Carolina, and I'll stay here in evil Texas. And
I'll dodge bullets in Chicago.
I've worked down there in Fort Worth. I like that area.
It's not that bad. But will you take care, and we'll keep in touch. We sure will.
Truly, yes.
Thank you very much. Have a great time.
Take care. Thank you.
Good night. Well, Heidi, we're just about ready to come to our top of the hour break. When we come back, we'll have George Haas on and William Saunders. We're going to talk about faces on Mars and anomalies, and people smoking cigarettes and behind boulders, and just anything else that goes on up there. But
we've been speaking to a lot of people that were interested in this kind of thing, and we kind of just put a group together. And then after we got some images back, William Saunders came on board.
Oh, okay. Well, I've always been intrigued with Mars, too, and I've seen alleged pictures of everything from tennis shoes to, golf carts or whatever, and you don't know what's true and what's not. And but isn't it true though, George, that way back in antiquity, as soon as they had telescopes, they've always observed a lot of activity, even on the moon, like unusual lights? And is that true with Mars as well, or is that just baloney? Or seems like I read it.
Well, yeah, they've observed a lot of interesting lights flashing off and on the moon. I don't think there's been any evidence of any lights going off on Mars. Okay. But, of course, we had the canals on Mars, and when actually we went up there with the Mariner 9 spacecraft, we were able to get some higher resolution pictures of the surface. Of course, there were a lot of faults and things in the surface that could have been these canals that were observed. But what the most astonishing thing was found, besides these, crevices and canal-like features, were all of these pyramidal formations that they were seeing.
Oh, yes, I forgot about those. Yeah, sure enough.
Even Carl Sagan had noticed some of these formations. So that really got the whole idea of, past civilizations on Mars, rejuvenated with that type of imagery that we were getting back.
Well, how far have they done it? I guess they have over all these years, but the Martian atmosphere, does it have any level of oxygen that's even close to supporting life as we know it, or they tested the components of it?
95% carbon dioxide, but it probably did have, there's evidence that it did have more of an atmosphere and probably a lot more oxygen at one time.
Oh,
just not sure how long ago.
Right, there's a news report currently on the internet about this study that shows that Mars was very Earth-like, had a lot of water. There's more and more evidence coming out that at one time Mars was probably very Earth-like, and probably sustained some type of plant life, possibly higher life. And from what we're seeing on Mars, there was obviously evidence that there was a civilization there. So. The more we learn about Mars, the more we see that it's very Earth-like. And, the things that Bill and I have found on Mars seem to mirror what we have on Earth here, seem to have been also prevalent on Mars.
Well, I know, of course, the face on Mars, of course, that's intriguing. And from the pictures I've seen, I'm not by any means an expert in any way, but what I've seen over the years, I don't see that just is just a happenstance circumstance. In other words, it does look like a carving as opposed to just a peculiar rock formation. What's y'all's take on it?
NASA was the first, their scientists were the first ones to say that it looked like a face. It wasn't, Richard Hoagland. It was actually the NASA scientist. When they went through the files and found there's like 3 really good images of that formation from the Viking image. Even NASA thought that it looked like a face. So, right from the beginning, NASA was the one that found this. It wasn't, the public.
Right.
But, we've gone from the face through all types of different formations found on Mars with the Mars Global Surveyor images, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter that's up there now taking these high-resolution images, which, there's just overwhelming evidence that there's artificial structures up there. And what we're talking about tonight on your program will be a science paper that we just had published in the Journal of Space Exploration, which is a Trade Science Incorporated publication that comes out of England. And we had this published back in November. And we think this, put the face on Mars aside, because it's very controversial about what type of formation we're looking at here. But this keyhole structure is just your basic geometrics. It's a symmetrical geometric form, and it's very easily to understand, and it looks like something that is not natural.
Okay. So it looks like a keyhole, you say?
Well, we only call it a keyhole because that's what archaeologists call these kind of formations. They're these keyhole formations were American Indians built them. They're in Saudi Arabia. They're also in Japan. Japan, which most people don't even realize that before the contemporary Japanese took over the island, there was an indigenous people there that built these keyhole formations. Which
before the Japanese?
To the Japanese, really? But they're just all over the place, and they don't get a lot of attention until we find one on Mars.
Yeah, I guess so. I didn't know there was a previous race in Japan to the forerunners to that group.
Oh yeah, when the Japanese came down, I'm not a anthropologist, but the Japanese very similar to the Chinese, the North Koreans, South Koreans. But you can just Google this. When the Japanese inhabited the island, there was indigenous people that were there.
Okay.
They were a lot taller.
Oh. So when you say a keyhole, it just looks like a keyhole in a door, I guess.
Yeah, that's basically just they're calling it a keyhole because of the geometry of the formation.
Right. It looks like a giant exclamation mark.
Well, right. When NASA, if you go to the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter website, and you put, we have, if the listening audience wants to go to the Sidoni Institute, just type in the Sidoni Institute and you can go to our website and click on the link that goes to our discussion board. And we have a topic here, which we're talking about tonight, about the keyhole formation. But actually, when we first put this topic up, it was called the exclamation mark, because that's what NASA called it. They said this looked like an exclamation mark. But, archaeologically, it's more of a keyhole formation. And they actually had a geologist come in, and his name was Alfred McEwen. He works for NASA, and he actually did a whole dissertation on the website about what this looked like. There's a little caption there. They're trying to explain away the geometry of this. And even the NASA scientists that they invited on to put the caption up for this image, they can't explain it. It's just so unique and so symmetrical that even NASA can't explain how this was formed naturally. And you can talk to William Saunders here, who's has a background in geology, and even he has trouble explaining how this thing was formed.
So there's no way that just erosion or what have you would make that kind of a structure.
Any thoughts there?
The thing is that it's very isolated. You have two large pieces of rock side by side, or one above the other, depending on how you look at it, that are geometrically opposed. One is round and rounded on top and almost circular, and the other is angular, and it's a trapezoid shape, and they're miles away from anything else their size. So they're sitting isolated, and there's symmetry to it, geometrical symmetry and opposition built right into it.
I'm taking a look at your site. It's pretty interesting. A lot of cool images, a lot of interesting chat and discussion going on. Well, you've got a lot of information on your site.
It does sound pretty good. It really does.
Sidoni Institute discussion board?
Yes, I looked over there. I'm going to share it in the chat room so people can check it out as well.
Yeah, if the listeners out there, they go over to the Cydonia Institute, just click on the discussion board, and when you get on the discussion board, go on to the topic, the thread for the exclamation mark, and it'll give a link to our paper, and there's a lot of images on there. We also have one of the diagrams that if you scroll down to like half down the page, we have the geometry that's explained with a drawing showing that all of these angular lines that are in this formation. I mean, it's just exquisite, the geometry in this formation.
And some people that are listening, it's the CYDONIA Institute.com. So they don't use an S. Cydonia, yeah. People are used to saying Sedona, and I'm one of those people.
This is all related to like Sedona, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
The Cydonia area on Mars was named after the master builders of the Bible that built Solomon's temple, were the Sidonians. If you look in your Bible, the Sidonians, it's spelled S-Y or S-I, the Sidonians.
Okay.
Basically the same thing. They were the master builders. And NASA just happens to call the area where the face on Mars is Cydonia, which is a reference to the master builders. And, of course, there's all these structures in the Cydonia area with the D&M pyramid, the face on Mars, and the city area that Richard Hoagland talks about. And not only is all of these structures on Mars in the Cydonia area, they're all over the planet.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. So I've heard of something that looks very much like a spacecraft on the surface. What do you make of some of these, like, things that were not attached necessarily to the planet, but like evidence of visitors going to the planet, like a ship? What do you think about those types of things? I mean, I've heard a lot of different claims.
I've seen those images of ships and saucers and things, and to me, they just look like natural domes or natural formations, or possibly. If they're not natural, they might be artificial structures, but I don't think they're remnants of spaceships myself.
Do you run into...
That's very sensationalized and gets a lot of headlines.
It's just like, do you get a lot of opposition when you say, oh, well, mine are real, but yours aren't? I mean, because I hear that from ghost hunters who don't believe in UFOs and vice versa. It's like, oh, those nut jobs. How do you defend against naysayers who are even kind of on your side, but saying, no, that one's not real, this one is?
Well, what Bill and I have found over, we've been doing this for over 25 years, and if some research, I put in quotation marks here, researcher finds some blurry picture of a formation that looks like a structure or something, it'll get massive coverage on Google and on the internet, and Huffington Post and CNN will have stories about it, and 99% of the time these are all just natural formations or blurry images. We have received hardly any coverage of this keyhole formation that we've actually had a science paper published. And, CNN, Fox News, ABC, NBC, Washington Times.
Well, now, George, I don't mean to interrupt.
None of them are interested.
We're just coming to our last break. We'll be right back. It's a very brief break. We'll be right back. Well, what are some of the others besides the keyhole formation?
Well, Bill and I are also members of the Society for Planetary SETI Research. You familiar with that group?
I've heard of them.
Yeah, the group was started by actually a group that Richard Hoagland put together when they were waiting for NASA to take new images of the face on Mars. It included Dr. Brandenburg, Dr. Mark Carlotto, Dr. Stanley McDaniel, Dr. Horace Crater, all these luminaries of this kind of research. And they put together, after they split with Richard Hoagland, on a lot of controversy that they had over the how he had approached the media with the face on Mars discovery. Stanley McDaniel and Mark Carlotto and Dr. Brandenburg, they put together a group that they called the Society for Planetary SETI Research. And they have about 50 members, and as a group over the last, I'd say 30 years, they produced probably 30, 40 papers on anomalous formations on the surface of Mars, which gets no media attention. I mean, people think that well, what's going on Mars? There's no science done about anything that's been it's all geology. But there's always these other papers that are being published in science journals that deal with anomalous formations on the surface of Mars that really gets little attention.
I really did not. I didn't get any good grades in geology. I'm gonna just be honest. But
I always wanted to take it. I just never did.
It was fascinating stuff, and it seems like it'd be easy. Nope. No.
Well, a lot of the members of the Society for Planetary Study Research are physicists. They have a couple geologists, but most of them are physicists. So not many geologists.
Very, very cool. I'm really curious. There's so many different types of people out there in the world, and it's like a lot of people that are driven into these different areas of research. I mean, we have, we're aiming to try to forward or advance mankind and their understanding of this world or the universe. What is really behind you guys? What drives you? What's your passion, and what's your ultimate goal in researching this topic? I mean, it's mind blowing, and it's a tough doozy. I think Bigfoot eating ghosts is easier to prove. This is the toughest thing you guys could have taken on. I mean, what's driving you? I'm really curious. I love it.
Mr. Saunders?
Oh, well, I guess it's just natural curiosity. When I first saw the face on Mars from the Viking orbiter back in 1976, I just knew that had to have been artificially constructed, and that kind of set me off. And I don't know, I guess just growing up in the era of space exploration, going to the moon and Star Trek and Lost in Space those sorts of things, just it kind of got me interested. And I don't know, it just kind of, whenever I saw any information, I looked into it.
Well, what do you? Let me ask you this. I'm interrupt, honey, but how much of that footage do we get that's not? I mean, of the footage from the rovers and all that, how much is, say, redacted or available? I mean, as a percentage? Some of it's censored, in other words, what I'm trying to say.
Well, this is George.
Okay.
As far as I know, none of it has been redacted or screened. NASA, if you go to the websites that actually post all of the new images that the rovers take, the little vehicles that are driving around, there's hundreds and hundreds that they put up a month of these images, and they just take one picture after another, and there's one little area of Mars, there's like 20 pictures or more, and you have to go through. It's a laborious task of going through these, but they just put them up, and I think NASA, they're not hiding anything. They're putting all the information out there, but the main thing is they are not commenting.
Yeah, they're not interpreting it. Yeah.
Anytime that any of the NASA scientists are doing a paper, the main theme is to discuss: is there water on Mars? And if there was water on Mars, how long ago was it's all about water and the geology. That's basically what they focus on. If they see something in the landscape that looks like an old machinery or an old, the chassis to a 1957 Chevy, they don't even look at that because that's not geology to them. They want to push that out of the way because the rock behind it will tell them more about the planet than that chassis sitting there. And it's bizarre that I'm sure you've looked at some of these images of the rovers that take these landscape images, and you look in the distance.
Yeah.
Well, that rock over there, that looks kind of weird. But we'll drive the rover over to a rock that looks like a rock and get a real close-up of that one. But the one on the left there that looks kind of like the chassis from the 57 Chevy, they won't even go near that.
Or that, yeah. So it's kind of like censorship by omission.
All we're left with is this distant picture of something that looks like machinery.
Yeah.
And we never get any real close-ups of them.
So it's censorship by omission.
Right.
Kind of thing.
So
well, listen, I certainly do
recognize taking close-ups of them and that we don't see, but they do release a lot of images, and the images that they do release do have a lot of data that show that there's a lot of crap sitting around. It looks like there was a massive war, things blew up, there's stuff all over the place, and it looks like a war.
Genuine artifacts. Yeah, genuine artifacts.
Yeah,
well,
all over the place.
I certainly recommend everybody go to the Cydonia Institute and investigate it and follow it. And it's been great having you.
Yeah.
It has.
Really. Well, thanks very much.
Being on your show and getting the message out.
Yeah, truly. I love you guys' passion. It's great.
Are we done already?
Yeah,
quick.
yeah. It's all. Yeah. It's amazing how good times go quickly. But listen, we'll send you a copy. We'll send you a copy of the show, and we look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
thanks
thank
very
you
much.
guys.
It's a pleasure.
Okay. We all
Truly.
have a good evening. Y'all have a good evening.
Yeah, good night to you guys.
Good night. Now, Heidi, next week I may give you a week off.
Uh-oh, why?
Well, Donna Voss is going to be on. Now, she's one of the nicer, conservative commentators, but I mean, I know that you don't want to be afflicted with people that have common sense. So
I think I recall Donna. I think she was halfway normal.
No, you seem to get along well with her, but I mean, I was giving you the option.
She's cool. Hey, if I have a pulse, I'll be here.
Well, now, who I would really like to have you on is my beloved Megan Kelly, but she's hard to get. She's making so much money,
Megan is sensible. She really is. So I mean, she's not that Goldie Hawn wannabe from the '60s. That I don't know.
No, wait a minute now. No. I love her, but anyway, that's a whole other story. But anyhow, let's see. Okay, so anyway, Donna Voss is going to be on next week, and then Karen Anderson is going to be on the following week. And we'll
What's she speaking on?
Well, she has a new book on animal communication, and
oh, cool.
And let's see. Oh, yes, and Michael Brown from SpiritDaily.com is going to be on the week after that. So we've got a lot of big guests coming on.
Love him. This Friday I've got Joanna Summerscales from the ET Newsroom. Oh, yes. So this Friday at 8 p.m. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. She's from across the pond. So interesting discussion. Yeah, I don't know. There's so much that's going on out there in the world. It's just kind of wackadoodle, and it doesn't have to do with Trump. So I'm putting my focus and attention that way because I don't want to get depressed.
Well, you got to admit, that was a pretty cool bunch of weirdness about some dude wearing a bowler hat on CBS News. I mean, why doesn't he just wear a Bozo the Clown outfit with polka dots and a funny nose or something? I mean,
I feel so out of touch. I haven't been watching the news for 4 days because I was stuck in Milwaukee, hanging with family and friends. So I've been out of touch. So I'm out of touch.
You should have seen the expression on the CBS News guys, like Ellie and all. They're thinking, "What the heck is this? Who is this guy made up for?" I mean, Heidi, come on, that's something like, out of a comedy skit or something. I mean,
pretty funny. Wish I saw it.
Well, I mean, of all the things I've seen, this was about the weirdest. I mean, if